Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and in this video we're going to continue on with our Express React Views project, and now we're going to incorporate a database, and we're going to use specifically Mongo. Now, in order to use a Mongo database, first we need to actually set up an account somewhere. So we're going to head over to mongodb.com, and we're going to set up a free account. So let this load. And again, you'll just go in here and try a free account. I'm going to sign into mine. Okay. Merced at alexmerced.com. And what MongoDB is just one type of database. It's what's referred to as a NoSQL database, which means that there's no relationships between data. It's just literally text data. Doesn't mean you can't create pseudo relationships and do all sorts of fun stuff with it. It's just that the way it stores the data, it doesn't necessarily give it any kind of, there's zero kind of inherent structure in it. So when you first create a MongoDB account, you're going to have this empty project. And you'll be able to create a cluster. A cluster is essentially one big massive store of databases. You can have as many databases inside of them, and in each database you can have as many what's called a collection, which would be like a table in a normal SQL database, and any of those tables can have as many documents, which would be a record in a normal database. Of course, if you hit a lot of traffic, a lot of usage, you might end up moving out of the free tier, but I wouldn't be too worried about that unless you create something pretty awesome that everyone's using. So first thing you want to do is actually create yourself a cluster. You get one free cluster per project. Okay, so I want the free cluster, which is going to be using shared server space. Again, it doesn't matter, this is just for learning how to make stuff. You can pretty much leave all the defaults. Okay, you can leave the default name, because it's going to basically set everything up on the free tier. Okay, which is the M0 sandbox. See, free forever. Okay, it's just not super fast if you're doing really crazy stuff. But yeah, you can basically leave all the defaults and just hit create cluster. And now this is going to be creating your cluster. So this is going to take a second, and then we'll come back to this and let this see how that works. So in the meanwhile, we're going to head back over here. The question is, how is our application going to communicate with that Mongo database? Well, there's a package inside Node that's going to allow us to make our app communicate with a Mongo database. So we're going to install that. That's called npm install mongoose. So Mongo and Mongoose are not the same thing. So think of Mongo as the actual database, and Mongoose is the bridge between our Node application and the Mongo database. It's what basically allows us to send information to the database and take information out of the database, because they're two separate things. So I hit enter on that, let that install. And while that installs, we can actually start setting that up in our code. And essentially the way it works, just like any other Node package, first we got to require it. So we'll create a variable const mongoose equals require mongoose. And accidentally ran the intro there again. My apologies. Wrong keystroke. And let's see here. Next thing we want to do is create a section in our code. And here we just put like database connection. And here we'll put all our code regarding connecting to the database. And the way this generally works, there's a couple variables we want to declare. Okay, so our db vars. We're going to have our Mongo, we'll just say Mongo URI. This is sort of the URL that connects to our database, which right now we don't have yet, so it's just an empty string. Actually, I will come back to that. Then we're going to have our const. We'll create a variable called db, which stands for our connection. So usually what we do here is we're going to change this to mongoose.connection. So connection is a property within the Mongoose object that gives you the state of your connection to a database. And then we also want this object. So I'm going to go to my another project that I have. And just copy it over. I just call it the db update object. And it doesn't really do anything particularly important right now for our purposes at the moment. The reason we have this object is just that it helps us avoid certain deprecation error warnings, which get really annoying, because what's going to happen is that every time your app connects on the terminal, you'll see these warnings and they'll scare you and you're like, oh no, is something wrong with my code? But it isn't. It's just they're warnings, and if you pass in this config object, those warnings won't be there. Okay, so good. So those are the variables. Okay, then we're going to actually make the connection. Okay, so it should be mongoose.connect. And then the thing is we're going to connect via the Mongo URI. Okay, so that's the database we're connecting to. And then we are going to pass in the db update object. Has some additional options. So this is the actual line where we connect to the code. Okay. Connect to DB. Now what we want to do is create some events that'll help us know, like, if we connected fine, when do we disconnect. So here we'll put some events. We'll call them DB events. And the way this works is we're going to connect to use our DB object that represents the connection, and it has this function on to do a few events. So we'll say on. And I just remember what these different events are. It's like connect, error, connected, disconnected, open. Error, connected, disconnected, open. Okay, let me go back over here. So on error, then we pass in a callback. Error, and here I'm just going to console.log the error. And actually, I should put the comma in the wrong place. Actually, just put that in the wrong place. There we go. Console.log error. There we go. So that'll just console log the error if for some reason we don't connect. db.on connected. And if we successfully get connected, what do I want to happen? I want to console log connected to Mongo. And db.on disconnected. Console.log disconnected from Mongo. I think we had one more, and when the connection opens. Okay. Okay. I'll leave it at that. That's good enough. Okay. Cool. Now let's go take a look at our cluster. And our cluster is up and running. Good, 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 good. So we need to get our Mongo URI, our URL, so we can actually connect to the database. So we're going to click on here, connect, and see. First, you have to whitelist an IP connection. So you want to make sure you whitelist your IP connection. I've already done this for this particular project. So again, you're going to want to go to the IP whitelist lab. And usually you could also just IP do all. It's probably the easiest way to do it for development. Just sit there and just what you do is you put .0.0.0.0, which just means any IP could access your database. But in that case, you also want to make sure that you have a username and password. So here you can create it. I'm going to make it real straightforward right now. I'll change it after this video. So user. So then I create the user. Okay, then we'll go to choose a connection method. Let me get that out of the way. Choose a connection method. Now, if I want to connect in terminal, I could use this to connect to my Mongo. In terminal, you do need to have Mongo installed locally for that to work. Or you can also download like Mongo's GUI interface, which is called MongoDB Compass, which you can then figure out how to connect to your database from there. But we want to connect our actual application. Okay, we want actually our application to be able to send commands to our database. So we'll hit connect your application. Now, depending on what you're building your backend in, so again, there's other languages you could be building your backend in, but we're building it in Node. So we'll click Node, and we'll choose 3.0 or later. And essentially it's just saying, hey, here's the URL you're going to use. So we will copy that. And instead of copying that into our code, because we don't want that exposed publicly, we're going to put that in our, okay, oh, wrong .env file right over here. Okay, and then here we'll make a variable called database, and that'll equal this URL. Okay, cool. Then we hit save, and let's just examine this for a second. So see here, we need to put username and password. So again, our username was user, and our password was user. So this is another reason why you put this in your .env file, not in your public area, because you don't want people seeing your username and user. So user, this is the actual link to the database. Now this is actually naming what database to connect to. So you can change this to whatever you want. Okay, I'm going to call this cheese so you can see that it works. And that is that. Okay. So now we should be able to connect. Actually, I need to do one thing. Go over here to Mongo URI and actually change this to access that environmental variable. Process.env.database. And then npm nodamon server.js. Okay, well, let's see what went wrong. Okay, so you see whenever you see this particular error, address already in use, 3001, that means it still thinks that there's a server listening on 3001. So something probably went wrong when I closed down the server prior. And some new terminal. So I'm going to have to use a different port number because it's not able to set up a listener on 3001. There's different ways to fix that problem. The easiest way is to restart the computer. I could also just go into terminal and kill processes on port 3001, which I guess isn't a bad thing to do. I think I have that command somewhere in my stuff here. Here we go. So I'll go into my terminal here, paste this command. So sudo kill, and then I want to kill what's on port 3001. And now let's try that again. So instead of me having to change the port, I'm actually going out there and fixing the port. And let's see if that worked. So far that looks good. And yeah, so now it's listening at port 371. And look, it got connected to Mongo, so we know that worked. Awesome. Even though right now our code doesn't really do anything. Now for me to actually be able to like put something in the database, I actually have to create what's called a schema. Okay, a schema basically defines the kind of data we put in and out of the database. Okay, the easiest thing to do here is to put this in a separate file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder. Actually, I'm just going to create a new file. New file schema.js. And we're just going to create a simple person schema. Okay. So in this file, we're going to bring in Mongoose. Require Mongoose equals Mongoose equals require Mongoose. You can tell I just woke up. Mongoose. Okay, and there's some other things we need to bring in there. Let me just go find the previous example. Okay. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring in a few things from there. So const, what I want is in the Mongoose object, there is something called schema. I want that. And there's something called model, and I want that. So instead of typing in mongoose.schema and mongoose.model, I'm just going to grab those two things. So mongoose. Cool. Now the first thing I want to do is build a new schema. So we're going to say const people. We'll call this people schema equals new schema. And then in that schema, we're going to pass in an object that defines the schema. We'll keep it real simple. So we'll have a property called name. That's a string. We'll have okay. And then we'll have email, which equals a string. And that works for me. There's also some details you can define here as far as like what properties are in the schema, what can they be, string, number, you know, you can make an array of strings, you can, sky's the limit. But what the idea here is with a schema, you're creating essentially a filter. So anytime we create new information, it has to follow this pattern in the schema, and anytime we pull information from the database from that particular area, it goes through this filter and only gives me this information. So now that the schema is created, now I need a model. So we're going to say const people equals a new, I forget if this is a object or a function. I think it's an object model. Okay. Yep. Okay. And the way this works is that first we have to pass in the schema, people schema, and then a name of the document. The document, not the name of the document, the name of the collection. So what this does is like where in my Mongo database. So I'm connecting. So if we go back to my .environmental variable, I'm going to connect to a database called cheese. That's what this specifies. So in my cluster, it'll make a database called cheese. And then here in my schema, I'm specifying in that database of cheese what collection do I want to create. So what kind of table do I want to make? And I want to make a table called, you know, person. Okay, and I haven't actually created that collection yet, so it will create it for me. So always remember with Mongoose that if it doesn't exist yet, it'll make it for you. So there is no database named cheese yet. Like if I go to my cluster here and I go to collections, okay, give it a second to load. See, there's no data there yet. No databases, no collections. Cool. And then I want to export module.export. This is how we send stuff out so we can use it somewhere else. Module that exports people. Cool. So we send that out so that we have access to this new object. So this object people is going to have a bunch of functions attached to it that allows us to interact with this people object. And every time we do something with it, it's going to use this filter and pull or put the resulting data in this collection in the database that we're connected to. So that's done. Let's go back to server.js. Okay, it's crashing. Why is it crashing? Oh, it's doing that whole 3001 problem again. So we'll come back to that. We'll fix that. Let me just close my server. Kill 3001 again. And let's see here. I want to bring in that schema. And actually, I want to do that after we connect to our database. Well, actually, that's after Mongoose is brought in, so that's fine. So require. Actually, let's throw that in a variable. So const people equals require schema.js. That's in the same folder, so dot schema.js. So that's going to go in here, look at this file, schema.js, realize that we exported people, and then store people in this new people in this file. And now I can use it in different routes. So let's say here, let's create a route where we can create a new person. Okay. So I'll just do it over here. App.get equals a person. This is the route. And then we'll have a param for name. And then email will be our two URL params. Then we will set up a callback. Request response okay, and then we would use people. I think it's people.create if I remember correctly. Okay, and that'll be the function we'll use in just a moment. But first I want to get the details out of. Well, actually, I could just do this. So basically, what's going to happen is we're going to create a new person. Okay, and basically what we'll do is we're going to say, the first thing we pass into people.create is the actual person we're creating. So we're going to pass in the request .params, because that should only have two properties, the name and the email, which are the two things we want to submit in there anyways. So that works. And then we have to pass in a callback. Okay, and then the callback, I think it's like error, and then the object, the thing that we created. So I'll just say error data. I always forget which is which. So we'll test that out first. And what I'm going to do is just say res.send Okay, and that's going to send back an object with the error and the data. Okay, so we can see what we got back. Oh, no. Okay, so let's just walk through this. So when I go to this route, it's going to try to create a new person. Hopefully we do it successfully, and if that is unsuccessful, it should send me back an error. If not, if it's successful, it'll send me back some return data showing me that it was done. And then again, what I want to happen after this database call is made goes in this callback, and that's that. And there's a whole bunch of functions in Mongoose. So I mean, if you want to know what's the function to update, to add, just take a moment, read the Mongoose documentation. But I mean, this is just again a quick illustration. So notamon server.js. Let's see if this all works. Oh, we crashed. Why did we crash? Schema.plugin is not a function. Why did we use schema.plugin? So let's find out. Run document.js. As to why, project 1. Now, in this case, what I'm going to do is do a quick look at other projects, so I'll be right back. Okay, so it looks like I need to go back to my schema and configure it a little bit differently. So a couple things I'm going to change is that this is lowercase because it is just a function. So in this case, I just do this, change this to an M, so it's model. And then this needs to be in reverse. So collection goes first. Person. Okay, and then I can delete this third argument. Okay, save. And that should, for the most part, fix this. Let's see. Another crash, and this is because of the 3001 being in use, because for some reason the port's being funny today. So let's kill that port again. Use notamon again. Okay, we're connected to Mongo. So, and no errors, so that means our schema should be good. So let's test out that route. Localhost and 3001 / people. Let's just double check that that's the route. Oh, wrong one. Server.js. So the route is person, name, email. So person, we'll say Alex, and the email's alexmerced@alexmerced.com. And again, how you submit the data, whether it's through a form or some other thing, you can do that. I'm just illustrating a way to do this. Okay, so it threw an error, so that should have an error over here. So let's see where the error was. Throw error, unhandled error event. Res is not defined. Oh, right here. It's because it's response, not res. Because I defined that as response over here. Okay, save. And I'm probably gonna get an error there. Yep, because of the whole 3001 thing. So let me kill the server, free up the port. In this case, I am not going to use notamon, because if I'm going to have to keep killing the port, no point in using notamon. So node server.js. But while we're at it, let me just take a look to see if the information got into our database yet. Oh, well that time there it worked. Okay, so you see, we got this object back that shows that we added it to our database because we got a unique ID. That's the object. And we can see that we put in the name and the email. So now if I go over here, and if I were to refresh this, I should see that data in there. Okay, and there we go. Here we see there's a database called cheese, and with a document called people, and we have two Alexes because again we ran that route twice, but each of them with their own unique ID. So that's essentially the premise there. Again, you can go create routes, and you just keep creating routes like we just did. Wrong one. You can create routes to edit it, delete it, and you can create multiple schemas for multiple pieces of information you want to keep track of. Sky's the limit at this point. So now you pretty much kind of have a lay of the land of using Express with Express React views and connecting a database and using environmental variables. The only kind of discussion left to have is actually uploading this to Heroku, which we will do next.